My son died in a fiery car crash 25 years ago. We buried him in a closed casket because there was nothing left to see. I put his favorite Nokia phone in his pocket myself before they lowered him into the ground. So tell me why, last Sunday during dinner, that exact phone started ringing inside my china cabinet. And tell me why, when I answered, his voice whispered, "Dad, they are coming for you next." I am Garrett Stone. I am 71 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have been living in a house that feels too big for one man. I spent 40 years as a construction foreman, building skyscrapers in Chicago, and I know how to spot a crack in a foundation before the building collapses. Right now, the foundation of my own life is crumbling, and the people holding the sledgehammers are sitting at my dining room table. I tightened the screw on the oak dining chair until the wood groaned. It held, solid as a rock. My son Tyler sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, his soft hands never having known a day of hard labor in his 40 years. He watched me work with a look that hovered between pity and impatience. To him, I was just an old man tinkering with garbage. To me, he was a man who would rather buy a new cheap plastic chair than fix a sturdy wooden one. That was Tyler in a nutshell. He always looked for the easy way out. Sunday dinner used to be a tradition of laughter and storytelling when my wife Meredith was alive. Now it was a weekly inspection. Tyler and his wife Brittany did not come to eat. They came to assess their future inventory. Brittany walked into the dining room carrying a store-bought roast chicken still in its plastic container. She did not even bother to put it on a plate. She set it down on the mahogany table my grandfather built. "Here you go, Dad," she said, her voice pitching up an octave in that fake tone people use for toddlers and the elderly. "We brought you dinner. You must be tired of cooking for yourself." I looked at the plastic container sweating grease onto the wood. "I cooked a steak for myself last night, Brittany. I am old, not invalid." Tyler sighed loudly, dropping his phone onto the table. "Don't be difficult, Dad. We are trying to help. You know Brittany is right. This place is becoming a hazard. I saw a loose shingle on the roof when we pulled in. If you climb up there and fall, who is going to find you? You could be lying in the grass for days." I cut a piece of the dry chicken. "I fixed that shingle this morning, Tyler, before you were even awake." Brittany exchanged a look with Tyler. It was a look I had seen many times over the last 6 months. A look of calculation. She reached into her oversized designer handbag and pulled out a thick blue folder. She slid it across the table, pushing aside the salt shaker. "Since we are all here, Dad, we need to discuss the future." Tyler and I spoke to Dr. Evans. He agrees that at your age, managing a 4-bedroom property and a portfolio of assets is just too much stress. It is bad for your heart. I put my fork down. "My heart is fine, Brittany. My blood pressure is lower than Tyler's." Tyler leaned forward. His eyes were bloodshot. I knew he had been up late gambling online again. I saw the notifications on his phone when he left it unlocked last week. He thought I was too old to understand technology. He thought I was just a retired builder living on a meager pension. He had no idea I owned 3 apartment complexes in the city under a holding company. He had no idea his inheritance was not just this house, but a fortune I had built brick by brick. "Dad, listen to me," Tyler said, his voice hardening. "You are forgetting things. Last week you forgot to pay the water bill." I did not forget, Tyler. The autopay system at the bank had a glitch. I fixed it in 10 minutes. "You are confused, Dad," Brittany interrupted, pressing her manicured finger onto the blue folder. "This is a durable power of attorney. It just gives us the right to help you manage the accounts, to make sure you do not get scammed. We are doing this because we love you." Love. That word tasted like ash coming from her mouth. I looked at my son. He was sweating. He needed money. I knew he was underwater on his mortgage, and he had maxed out 3 credit cards. He did not want to help me manage my money. He wanted to drain it. "I am not signing anything." I said, my voice low and steady, the voice I used to use to command 200 men on a job site. Tyler slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. You have to sign it. You are incompetent. You are just a stubborn old man sitting on a gold mine while your family suffers. The mask had slipped. There it was. The greed, the desperation. I stood up. My knees popped, but I stood tall. I am 6'2". Even at 71, I still cast a long shadow. Get out, I said. Get out of my house. Suddenly, a sound cut through the tension like a circular saw. It was a digital, monophonic ringtone, a sound from another century. It was the default ringtone of a Nokia 3310. The room went dead silent. Brittany froze. Tyler's mouth hung open. The sound was coming from the china cabinet in the corner. The cabinet where I kept Meredith's fine porcelain, and a small wooden box containing the few things we recovered from Leo's accident. My breath hitched. That phone had not been charged in 25 years. It was buried 6 feet under the earth in the pocket of my dead son's favorite denim jacket. I walked over my legs, feeling heavy as lead. The ringing continued, loud, insistent, impossible. Dad, don't touch it, Tyler whispered, and for the first time he looked genuinely terrified. It is just a timer. You probably set an alarm on an old clock and forgot. I opened the glass door. I reached for the wooden box. My hands, which had held jackhammers and steel beams without shaking, were trembling now. I opened the box. Inside, the gray brick of a phone was vibrating against the velvet lining. The screen glowed green. The black pixels formed 3 letters. Leo. I stared at it. My brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. Leo was dead. I identified the body. Well, I identified the watch on the wrist, because the fire had left little else. I pressed the answer button. I held the cold plastic to my ear. Dad. The voice was static, filled, and weak, but I would know it anywhere. It was the voice of my 20-year-old boy. Dad, listen to me. Do not sign the papers. They are going to kill you. I don't have much time. Give me that. Tyler snatched the device from my hand. He looked at the screen, his face draining of color for a split second before the mask of rage slammed back into place. He pressed the end call button with a violent jab of his thumb. He threw the phone onto the carpet. It bounced, but did not break. Nokias never break. What is wrong with you, Dad? Tyler shouted. Who is playing this sick joke? You programmed this, didn't you? You programmed it to scare us. I stared at him. My son. My living son. He looked like a stranger. It was Leo, I whispered. It was Leo's voice. Tyler grabbed my shoulders and shook me. Leo is dead. He has been dead for 25 years. You are hallucinating. Brittany was already on her smartphone, her fingers flying across the screen. Dr. Evans, yes, it is happening right now. He is having a psychotic break. He thinks his dead son is calling him. He is aggressive. Yes, we need you here. Now. I pulled away from Tyler. I am not crazy. That phone rang. You saw it. You held it. I saw an old man losing his grip on reality, Tyler spat. I saw a phone you probably charged up last night in a fit of dementia. You need help, Dad. And we are going to make sure you get it, whether you want it or not. He moved between me and the phone on the floor. He kicked it under the sofa. Sit down, Brittany commanded, pointing to the chair. Do not move. Dr. Evans is coming with a sedative. It is for your own good. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were not panicked. They were relieved. This was exactly what they needed. A public display of insanity. Proof that Garrett Stone was no longer fit to lead the family. Proof that they could take the reins. I sat down. Not because I was obedient, but because I needed to think. My mind was racing. The voice, the warning. They are going to kill you. Leo knew about the papers. How could a dead man know about the power of attorney Tyler just put on the table 5 minutes ago? 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was Dr. Evans. He was a man I had never liked. He drove a Porsche and smelled of expensive cologne and ethical flexibility. He walked in with a medical bag, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. "Garrett," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I hear we are having a rough evening." "Hearing voices, I am not hearing voices," I said firmly. I received a phone call. Dr. Evans nodded condescendingly while pulling a syringe from his bag. "Of course you did. And who was calling my son?" "Leo." Tyler let out a dramatic sob, burying his face in his hands. "See, he is completely gone. He thinks Leo is alive." Dr. Evans tapped the syringe. "This will just help you relax, Garrett. It will help you sleep without the nightmares." I stood up. "You are not sticking that in me." Tyler stepped forward, blocking my path. "Dad, please. Just take the medicine. Or do we need to call the police to restrain you for your own safety?" The threat hung heavy in the air. If the police came and I was acting aggressive, I would be put in a psychiatric hold for 72 hours. That would be enough time for them to file an emergency guardianship. I had seen it happen to my friends. Once the system has you, it does not let go. I looked at the syringe. Then I looked at the phone kicking under the sofa. I needed clarity, not a fight. Not yet. "Fine," I said. "I will take a pill. No needles. I hate needles." Dr. Evans paused, then nodded. "Very well. Oral sedation might be less traumatic." He fished a small blue pill from a bottle in his bag. "Swallow this. It acts fast." I took the pill. I put it in my mouth. I reached for my glass of water. I took a big gulp. I swallowed loudly. "Good," Dr. Evans said. "Now lie down on the sofa. Rest." I lay down. I closed my eyes. I let my breathing slow. I waited. I waited until I heard their voices drop to a whisper. "He is out," Tyler said. God, that was close. "Did you get the phone? I have it," Brittany whispered. "I will smash it and throw it in the dumpster on the way home. We can't have him finding it and triggering another episode." "Did he really program it?" Tyler asked. "Who cares?" Brittany snapped. "It worked in our favor. Evans is writing the report right now. Acute psychosis. We will have the guardianship by Tuesday." They laughed. A soft, cruel sound. I lay there perfectly still. The blue pill was tucked safely between my cheek and my gum. I had learned that trick in the army 50 years ago. I waited until the front door closed. I waited until the sound of their car faded down the street. I waited another 10 minutes just to be safe. Then I sat up. I spat the blue pill into a tissue and flushed it down the toilet. The house was silent. They had taken the Nokia. They thought they had taken the proof, but they underestimated me. They always did. They thought I was just a carpenter who got lucky. They didn't know I spent my nights reading about cybersecurity and network protocols because I was bored in my retirement. I walked to my study. I locked the door. I sat down at my custom-built PC, the one with the 3 monitors that Tyler thought was for playing solitaire. I had synced that Nokia to a cloud logging service 10 years ago when I was feeling sentimental and wanted to back up the old text messages Leo had sent me before he died. I never thought I would use it for live tracking. I logged in. My fingers flew across the keyboard. There it was. Log entry Sunday. 7:03 p.m. Incoming call. Source unknown number. Duration 12 seconds. Audio recording saved. I clicked play. "Dad, listen to me. Do not sign the papers. They are going to kill you. I don't have much time." It was real. The digital waveform danced on my screen, confirming what my ears had heard. But then I noticed something else. I clicked on the metadata of the call. I traced the IP packet routing. I expected the signal to be a ghost, to be spoofed, to be nothing. But it wasn't. The signal originated from a location 300 miles away. I pulled up the map. The coordinates pointed to a remote facility in the mountains of West Virginia, a place called Sanctuary Hills. I zoomed in on the satellite view. It looked like a fortress, high fences, guard towers, and a main building that looked more like a prison than a sanctuary. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why was my dead son's phone calling me from a high-security facility? And how did he know about the papers Tyler had just put on the table? I leaned back in my chair. My son was dead. I saw the coffin go into the ground. Or did I? I remembered the funeral, the closed casket. Meredith, my late wife, insisting that we not look at the body because the burns were too severe. She had been the one to identify him. She had been the one to handle the paperwork. She had been the one who insisted on the quick burial, Meredith. She had died 5 years ago, taking her secrets to the grave. Or so I thought. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Underneath a pile of old tax returns was a metal lockbox. Meredith's box. I had never opened it out of respect for her privacy. I picked the lock with a paperclip. It took me 3 seconds. Inside there were no jewels, no love letters. There was a bank book for an account I didn't know existed, an account in the Cayman Islands. And there was a receipt, a monthly payment receipt. Amount $5,000. Payee Sanctuary Hills. Reference patient 104. The most recent receipt was dated the day before Meredith died. My hands shook as I held the paper. Patient 104. I looked at the screen where the map of Sanctuary Hills glowed. Tyler and Brittany were not just greedy. They were part of something much bigger, something Meredith had started 25 years ago. My son was not dead. He was a prisoner, and he had just broken his silence to save my life. I stood up. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed my old .45 caliber service pistol from the safe. Tyler thought I was sleeping. He thought he had won. He was about to find out that Garrett Stone does not sleep when his family is under attack. I walked out to my truck. The night was dark, but my path was clear. I was going to dig up a grave, not in the cemetery, but in the mountains. I started the engine. It roared to life, a deep, angry sound that matched the fire in my gut. I was coming for you, Leo, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I pulled my truck onto the shoulder of the road, a few blocks from Alan Henderson's house. The digital clock on the dashboard read 3:15 in the morning. The engine ticked as it cooled, a metallic heartbeat in the silence of the sleeping suburbs. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My service pistol was heavy in the glove compartment, but right now I needed a different kind of weapon. I needed information. Alan was not just my lawyer. He was the only man in this town I trusted to keep his mouth shut. We had served in the same platoon 50 years ago. He knew the difference between a legal problem and a war, and he knew which one I was fighting now. I walked up his driveway, avoiding the motion sensor lights, by sticking to the shadows of the hedges. I didn't ring the doorbell. I knocked 3 times on his study window, a signal we hadn't used since we were young men sneaking out to play poker. A minute later, the light flicked on. Alan appeared in a bathrobe, his white hair standing up in every direction. He opened the window, squinting into the dark. "Garrett," he whispered, his voice rough with sleep. "If you haven't killed anyone yet, use the back door. If you have, keep driving." "I haven't killed anyone," I said. "Not yet. I met him in the kitchen. He didn't ask why I was there. He just put a pot of coffee on the stove and sat down at the small round table where he did his best thinking. I placed the metal lockbox I had taken from Meredith's desk in front of him. The receipt for Sanctuary Hills sat on top. "I need you to open the files for the Leo Stone Memorial Fund," I said. Alan rubbed his face. "Garrett, that fund has been closed for years. Meredith dissolved it before she passed." "No," I said, tapping the receipt. "She didn't. She just buried it, like she buried everything else." Alan looked at the receipt. His eyes narrowed behind his reading glasses. He stood up without a word and walked to his home office. I followed him. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Walls of filing cabinets lined the room, a physical testament to 40 years of legal practice. He pulled a heavy drawer open and thumbed through the manila folders until he found a thick one labeled Stone. He dropped it on the desk. Dust motes danced in the lamplight. "We set this up 25 years ago," Alan said, opening the file. "It was supposed to be a charity. Donations for families who lost children in auto accidents. Meredith was the sole trustee. I just handled the tax filings in the beginning." "Look closer," I said. Alan started flipping through the pages. His finger traced the columns of numbers. At first it looked standard. Donations coming in from the community, from the church, from the insurance payout. But then he stopped. He flipped back a page, then forward again. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "What do you see?" "The outflows," Alan said, pointing to a column of figures. "For the first year, there are small grants. $500 to the Children's Hospital, $1,000 to the Road Safety Council. But starting 18 months after after the funeral, the pattern changes." He pulled out a ledger sheet from deep in the stack. "Here, a monthly standing order. $5,000. Every month. For 25 years. "Who is the recipient?" I asked, though I already knew. "It is listed as a consulting fee." Alan said, his brow furrowing. "To a shell company called SH Management." "Sanctuary Hills," I corrected him. Alan looked up at me. The realization hit him slowly. "Sanctuary Hills, the psychiatric facility, Garrett, that place is for the criminally insane and high-risk patients. It costs a fortune." "Meredith was paying them," I said, my voice cold. "She used the money people gave us to honor our son's memory. She used the insurance money for his death, and she used it to keep him locked up in a cage 300 miles away." Alan slumped back in his chair. He looked sick. "I helped her," he whispered. "I signed off on these audits. She told me SH Management was a lobbying group for safer highway laws. I never checked. I trusted her. We all trusted her," I said. "That was her greatest weapon." "But why?" Alan asked. "Why keep him alive and hide him? Why not just—" "Because of Tyler," I said. I told Alan everything. The phone call, the warning, the pill I didn't swallow, the revelation that Tyler was trying to seize my assets. Alan listened, his face hardening with every sentence. He was a lawyer, but he was a father first. The idea that a mother would erase one son to protect the other and then imprison the survivor was a violation of nature. He turned back to the files, his hands moving faster now, fueled by anger. "We need to find the current paper trail," he said. "Meredith died 5 years ago. If the payments stopped, Sanctuary Hills would have discharged him or disposed of him," I finished. Alan typed furiously on his computer, accessing the state records and banking portals he still had access to as the family attorney. "The fund was transferred," Alan said, his eyes glued to the screen. 2 days before Meredith died, she transferred the trusteeship. "To who?" Alan clicked the mouse. "To Tyler Stone." The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Tyler knows," I said. "He has known for 5 years." Alan nodded grimly. "He knows. And look at this." He turned the screen toward me. It was a bank statement from last month. The balance of the fund was dangerously low. There was only enough money for maybe 2 more payments. He is draining it, Alan said. He has been siphoning off the principal. He isn't just paying the facility anymore. He is taking withdrawals for himself. Administrative expenses, travel costs. He is bleeding the account dry. That is why he needs my money, I realized. It isn't just his gambling debts. He needs to keep paying the facility to keep the secret buried. If the money runs out, Sanctuary Hills kicks Leo out and the truth comes walking through the front door. Or Alan said softly, he stops paying, and he lets nature take its course. The thought made my blood run cold. Tyler wasn't just a thief, he was a jailer, and now with the money running out, he was preparing to become an executioner. I stood up. I need to go. Where Alan asked, standing up with me. West Virginia. You can't just walk in there, Garrett. It is a secure facility. You need a court order. You need the police. I don't have time for courts, I snapped. And the police, if I go to them now, Tyler will claim I am senile. He has Dr. Evans' report. He has the narrative. By the time they investigate, Leo could be moved. Or worse. I need you to hold the fort here, Alan. I need you to freeze everything. Find a way to lock Tyler's access to that fund. Stall him. Make him panic. If I freeze the fund, the payment to the facility will bounce, Alan warned. Good, I said. Let them panic too. Chaos is the only advantage I have right now. I walked to the door. Alan grabbed my arm. Garrett, he said. This place. Sanctuary Hills. It is not a hospital. I have heard rumors about it over the years. It is a place where rich people hide their mistakes. They have armed guards. They have walls. You are 71 years old. You are one man. I patted the pocket of my jacket, where the keys to my truck jingled against the spare magazine for my pistol. I am not just one man, Alan. I am a father, and I have 25 years of catching up to do. I walked out into the night air. It was cold, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the heat of the anger burning in my gut. The deception was total. The charity fund, the Grieving Widow Act, the memorial services every year where Meredith would cry on command. It was all a facade, a mask to cover a monster. I climbed into my truck and turned the key. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the street where I had taught both my boys to ride bikes. Tyler thought I was asleep. He thought I was a problem to be managed, an asset to be liquidated. He had no idea that he had just woken up something that had been dormant for a quarter of a century. I pulled out onto the main road and pointed the truck east toward the mountains. The drive would take 6 hours. I wouldn't stop for food. I wouldn't stop for rest. Every mile marker I passed felt like a layer of lies being peeled away. I was done with the past. I was done with grief. I reached for the radio and turned it off. I needed silence. I needed to focus. Because when I arrived at Sanctuary Hills, I wasn't going to ask for permission to see my son. I was going to tear the walls down until I found him. I drove back to my house in silence, the darkness of the early morning pressing against the windshield. My meeting with Alan had given me the ammunition, but now I needed to get to the battlefield. I thought I had time. I thought Tyler was asleep, dreaming of the money he was going to steal. I was wrong. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light snapped on. It blinded me for a second, a harsh white glare that felt like an interrogation lamp. Tyler was standing on the steps. He wasn't wearing his pajamas. He was dressed in jeans and a hoodie, his arms crossed, his face twisted into a mask of pure malice. He had tracked my phone. I had forgotten that the family plan shared location data. Amateur mistake. I stepped out of the truck. I didn't have time for pleasantries. I tried to walk past him, but he blocked the door. His hand shot out, snatching the keys to my Silverado right out of my hand. "Going somewhere, Dad?" he asked. His voice was shaking not with fear, but with adrenaline. I saw you at Henderson's house. I saw you on the map. You are conspiring against me." I looked him in the eye. "I am fixing the mess you made, Tyler. Now give me my keys." He laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "No, you are not going anywhere. You are sick. You are wandering at night. You are a danger to yourself." He shoved me. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to make me stumble back. He unlocked the front door, grabbed my arm, and pulled me inside. He slammed the heavy oak door and threw the deadbolt. Then he did something that made my blood boil. He took a tube of super glue from the junk drawer, the same glue I used to fix his toys when he was a boy, and he squeezed it into the keyhole. "There," he said, tossing the empty tube onto the floor. "Now nobody gets in and nobody gets out. The doctors will be here at 8 a.m. to take you to the facility for evaluation. Until then, you sit in your chair." He marched into the kitchen and ripped the cord of the landline out of the wall. He pocketed my cell phone, which he had swiped from the counter where I left it charging earlier. He had stripped me of my communications and my transport. He looked at me with a smug satisfaction, like a child who had just trapped a spider in a jar. "Go to your room, Dad," he said. "Get some sleep. You are going to need it." I didn't argue. I didn't fight him. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom and closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. He had reversed the handle years ago when his kids were small to keep them from locking themselves in. Now it was a cell door. I stood in the center of the room. My heart was hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Tyler thought he had won. He thought a locked door and some glue were enough to hold Garrett Stone. He forgot that I built this house. I poured the foundation. I framed the walls. I hung the drywall. I knew every nail, every screw, and every weakness. I walked to the window. It was a double-hung vinyl unit installed back in '98. Tyler thought windows were just glass you looked through. I saw them for what they were, a frame held in place by 4 tension screws and a bead of caulk. I went to my nightstand. In the bottom drawer, underneath a pile of old Reader's Digest magazines, I kept my Leatherman tool. I never went anywhere without it. It was stainless steel, heavy and reliable. I unfolded the blade. I didn't smash the glass. Breaking glass makes noise, and noise draws attention. I needed stealth. I wedged the blade between the sash and the frame. I sliced through the old paint that had sealed the window shut over the years. I worked the blade around the perimeter, feeling the tension release. Then I located the stop beads on the sides. I used the flathead screwdriver bit to pry them loose. The wood groaned softly, a sound like a floorboard settling. I paused, listening. Outside the door, I could hear the faint sound of the TV. Tyler was watching sports, confident in his victory. I removed the stops. I tilted the bottom sash inward. It popped out of the track with a soft thud. I set it gently on the bed. Then I did the same with the top sash. Now I had a hole in the wall 4 feet high and 3 feet wide. I looked out. The drop to the flower bed was about 8 feet. 20 years ago, I would have jumped it without thinking. At 71, with knees that clicked like a ratchet wrench, it was a calculated risk. I grabbed the bedsheets. I tied them together with a square knot, tested it, and anchored one end to the heavy post of my bed frame. I threw the other end out into the night. I climbed out backwards. The cool air hit my neck. I lowered myself hand over hand until my feet were dangling a few feet from the mulch. I let go. I landed in a crouch, rolling to absorb the impact. My left knee flared with pain, a sharp reminder of my age, but I bit my tongue and stood up. I was out, but I was on foot, and Sanctuary Hills was 300 miles away. I crept around the side of the house, staying in the shadows of the azalea bushes. I peered into the driveway. My Silverado was there, but Tyler had the keys in his pocket. His own car, a leased BMW that he couldn't afford, was parked behind it, blocking the exit. He thought he had checkmated me, but he had forgotten about the shed. I limped across the backyard to the detached workshop. It was overgrown with ivy, a place Tyler never visited because it smelled of oil and sawdust. Inside, under a tarp covered in 10 years of dust, sat my 1978 Ford F-150. It was rusted around the wheel wells. The paint was more primer than blue. Tyler called it the heap. He had begged me to sell it for scrap metal a dozen times. I had always refused, not because of sentiment, but because it was the only vehicle I owned that didn't have a computer chip in it. It was mechanical. It was simple. And it was mine. I pulled the tarp off. The dust swirled in the moonlight. I opened the driver's side door. The hinge creaked loudly, a screech that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. I froze. I looked toward the house. The light in the living room flickered. The TV volume went down. He heard it. I didn't have time to be gentle. I dove into the cab. I didn't need a key. I had installed a hidden kill switch and a push-button starter under the dashboard years ago, an anti-theft measure for a time when car thieves actually knew how to hotwire cars. I flipped the switch. I pressed the button. The engine turned over. Chug, chug, chug. It hadn't been run in 6 months. "Come on, old girl," I whispered. "Don't die on me now." Chug. Chug. Roar. The V8 engine exploded to life, a raw, unmuffled bellow that shook the tools on the walls. It was loud enough to wake the dead. It was definitely loud enough to wake Tyler. I slammed it into reverse. I didn't bother opening the shed doors. I just gassed it. The truck smashed through the wooden doors of the shed, splintering the rotten wood like matchsticks. I flew backward into the yard, spinning the wheel. I looked toward the house. The front door flew open. Tyler ran out barefoot, screaming something I couldn't hear over the roar of the engine. He looked at the empty driveway where his BMW blocked the Silverado. Then he saw me in the yard tearing up the grass in the old Ford. He ran for his BMW. I threw the truck into drive. The tires spun, biting into the soft earth, flinging mud and grass into the air. I fishtailed onto the driveway, hopping the curb. I didn't aim for the street. I aimed for the fence. The chain-link fence separated my property from the old access road that ran behind the subdivision. Tyler didn't know that road existed. He only knew the GPS routes. I braced myself. The heavy steel bumper of the Ford hit the fence post. Metal screamed. The truck shuddered, but it didn't stop. We plowed through, dragging a 20-foot section of fencing with us for a few yards before it shook loose. I hit the gravel of the access road and floored it. The speedometer needle bounced. 40, 50. The suspension groaned over every pothole, rattling my teeth, but the engine sang. I checked the rearview mirror. Twin xenon headlights pierced the dust cloud behind me. Tyler was coming. His BMW was faster, sleeker, and had superior handling. On a highway, he would catch me in minutes. But we weren't on a highway. We were on an old service road used by logging trucks and teenagers looking for a place to drink. It was riddled with ruts, washboards, and sharp turns. I saw him gaining on me. He was driving recklessly, anger making his foot heavy. He tried to pull alongside me to cut me off. I saw his face in the window, contorted with rage, his mouth moving in a scream. He swerved toward me, trying to intimidate me. He thought I would flinch. He thought I was a scared old man. I yanked the steering wheel to the left. The steel body of my truck slammed into the plastic side panel of his luxury car. Crunch. Sparks flew. His plastic mirror shattered against my door. The impact sent his light car bouncing toward the ditch. He overcorrected. His tires lost traction on the loose gravel. I watched in the mirror as the BMW spun out, doing a full 360 before sliding backward into a drainage ditch filled with muddy water. The headlights pointed uselessly at the sky. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I kept my foot pinned to the floor. I drove for 10 miles on the back roads, navigating by memory and moonlight, until I reached the interstate on ramp 3 towns over. Only then did I let the engine settle into a steady hum. My hands were shaking on the wheel now that the adrenaline was fading. My knee was throbbing. My heart felt like a bird trapped in a cage. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a burner phone I kept for emergencies. I dialed Alan's number. "I am out," I said when he answered. "Garrett." Alan's voice was panicked. "Tyler just called the police. He reported the truck stolen. He says you are having a mental health crisis and you are armed and dangerous. They have an APB out on you." "Let them look," I said. "I am not in the truck anymore." I wasn't lying. I pulled the Ford into a dense patch of woods near an old quarry. I stripped the license plates. I covered it with branches. It would take them days to find it. I walked 2 miles to a truck stop diner. I walked into the bathroom and washed the grease and blood off my hands. I looked in the mirror. The eyes staring back at me weren't the eyes of a retired grandfather. They were the eyes of a sergeant who had crawled through mud and fire to get his men home. I walked out to the parking lot. A long-haul trucker was fueling up his rig. I approached him. I held out $500 in whoosh. "I need a ride east," I said, "as far as you are going." The trucker looked at the money, then at my face. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and unlocked the passenger door. I climbed into the cab of the 18-wheeler. As we merged onto the highway, I watched the police cruisers speeding in the opposite direction, lights flashing, sirens wailing, hunting for a blue Ford that was already a ghost. I closed my eyes. I wasn't running away. I was advancing. West Virginia was waiting, and so was my son. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the peaks of the Appalachian Mountains when I saw it. Sanctuary Hills wasn't a hospital. It was a fortress carved out of the rock face surrounded by 12-foot fences topped with razor wire that glinted in the morning light. There were no welcome signs, no manicured lawns, just concrete steel and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I had walked the last 5 miles from where the trucker dropped me off, sticking to the tree line, moving with the ghost of the soldier I used to be. My knee was screaming with every step, a hot iron rod jammed into the joint, but pain was just information. The information right now was that I was running out of time. I crouched behind a cluster of pines near the main service road. I watched the gate. It was a dual checkpoint system. A vehicle would pull in, the first gate would close, guards would inspect it, and only then would the second gate open. Trying to cut the fence would trigger sensors. Trying to talk my way in would get me arrested. I needed a Trojan horse. It arrived 20 minutes later. A white box truck with a food service logo on the side rumbling up the incline. The driver was young, maybe 25, tapping on the steering wheel to the beat of whatever was in his headphones. He pulled over onto the shoulder about 100 yards from the gate to check his clipboard. I didn't hesitate. I moved out of the woods and walked straight up to the driver's side window. I didn't look like a threat. I looked like a lost old man in dirty clothes. That was my camouflage. He rolled down the window, a frown creasing his forehead. "Can I help you, Pops? You lost." I pulled my service pistol from my waistband. I didn't point it at him. I just let it rest on the window frame, heavy and undeniable. "I am not lost, son. I need a ride." The kid's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth to scream. "Don't," I said, my voice calm. "I am not going to hurt you. I just need to get inside that gate. You are going to open the back. I am going to get in. You are going to drive through the checkpoint. Just like you do every Tuesday. You act normal. You go home to your family tonight. You act stupid, and we both have a very bad day. Do you understand?" He nodded, swallowing hard. His hands were shaking on the wheel. I reached into my pocket with my free hand and pulled out the roll of cash I had taken from the bank before this nightmare started. I tossed $500 onto his lap. "That is for the inconvenience. Now open the back." He hit the button. The lock on the rear roll-up door buzzed. I moved to the back of the truck, keeping my eyes on the mirrors. I climbed inside. It smelled of cardboard and refrigerated produce. I pulled the door down, plunging myself into darkness. I wedged myself between a pallet of canned corn and the wall of the truck. A minute later, the engine revved and we started moving. The ride was short. The truck slowed, then stopped. I heard the hiss of air brakes. "Driver ID, please." A guard's voice. Gruff, bored. The kid's voice was shaky. Just the usual delivery man. "You okay?" "You sound nervous." "Just a long drive." "Too much coffee." I heard footsteps crunching on gravel. They were walking around the truck. A flashlight beam cut through the cracks in the rear door, dancing over the boxes. I held my breath, my hand tightening on the grip of my pistol. If they opened the door, I would have to shoot. I didn't want to shoot a working man doing his job, but I wasn't turning back. The light disappeared. "All right, you are clear. Go ahead." The truck lurched forward. The second gate clanged shut behind us. We were in. We drove for another 2 minutes before stopping at the loading dock. I waited until I heard the driver get out and walk toward the building entrance. I counted to 10. Then I rolled the door up just enough to slide out. I dropped to the concrete. I was in a service bay. 2 men in kitchen whites were arguing by a dumpster about a sports game. They didn't see me slip behind a stack of empty crates and through the service door that had been propped open with a brick. I was inside. The air was different here. It was cold-conditioned and smelled aggressively of bleach and pine cleaner, the smell of places that are trying to hide the scent of sickness. The floors were polished linoleum that squeaked under my boots. I needed to blend in. I found a laundry cart in the hallway. I grabbed a blue scrub top and a white lab coat from the pile. I put them on over my flannel shirt. It wasn't a perfect disguise, but from a distance I was just another old doctor or maintenance tech. I walked with purpose. If you look like you know where you are going, people rarely stop you. I passed nurses' stations where staff were glued to computer screens. I passed orderlies pushing wheelchairs. No one looked at me. I was invisible. I found a directory on the wall near the elevators. It was color-coded. Blue for administration. Green for general population. Red for high security, long-term care. Patient 104. The receipt said patient 104. I followed the red line. It led me to a heavy steel door with a keypad. This was the separation. This was where the patients ceased to be people and became numbers. I waited. A minute later, a nurse with a lanyard swiped her card and punched in a code. As the door buzzed and clicked, I moved. I caught the door just before it latched, holding it with the toe of my boot. I waited for her to turn the corner, then slipped through. The atmosphere changed instantly. The lights were dimmer here. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the occasional distant moan. The doors were solid wood with small reinforced glass windows. There were no names on the doors, just numbers. 101. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was walking down a hallway of ghosts. Behind every door was someone's child, someone's parent hidden away by families who had enough money to buy forgetfulness. I stopped. The door was exactly like the others. Heavy. Impersonal. A metal placard screwed into the wood read 104. I reached for the handle. It was locked. Of course it was locked. It was a prison cell. I looked up and down the hall. Empty. I took out my Leatherman again. I didn't have time to pick the lock. I jammed the flathead screwdriver into the gap between the door and the frame right at the latch. I leaned my entire body weight into it. Wood splintered, metal groaned. With a sharp crack, the latch gave way. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was in shadows, the blinds drawn tight against the mountain sun. It was cold, freezing cold. The only light came from the green glow of a heart rate monitor. There was a bed in the center of the room. A figure lay under the white sheets, still as death. I walked closer. My legs felt numb. The air in the room tasted of stale medicine and despair. I reached the side of the bed. I looked down. The man in the bed was not the boy I remembered. The boy I remembered had thick brown hair and a linebacker's build. He had a smile that could get him out of any trouble. The man in the bed was a skeleton wrapped in skin. His hair was thin and graying. His face. I gripped the bedrail to keep from falling. Half of his face was a map of shiny, twisted scar tissue. Burn marks. Old, deep burns that had healed into a mask of agony. His left ear was gone. His left arm resting on top of the sheet was withered, the fingers curled into a permanent claw. But it was him. I knew the shape of his jaw. I knew the small mole on his neck, now stretched by age but still there. It was Leo. My son. My boy. He had been here for 25 years. While I was building houses, while I was eating Sunday dinners, while I was mourning his grave, he was here. In this room. Alone. In pain. A sound escaped my throat, a strangled sob that I couldn't hold back. The figure in the bed stirred. His head turned slowly on the pillow. His eyelids fluttered open. One eye was milky and blind, damaged by the fire. But the other eye, that blue eye, it was clear. It was sharp. He looked at me. He didn't speak. He just looked as if he were seeing a ghost. Leo, I whispered. His lips moved. They were dry and cracked. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. He swallowed, his throat working hard. He tried again. Dad! The word was a rusted hinge breaking open. I fell to my knees beside the bed. I grabbed his good hand. It was cold, so cold. I warmed it between mine. I am here, Leo. I am here. He squeezed my hand. It was a weak grip, but it was real. He was real. You came, he rasped, a tear leaking from his good eye and tracking through the scars. You actually came. I told you I would, I said, my voice thick with tears. I told you I would fix it. He looked at me with an intensity that terrified me. His gaze darted to the door, then back to me. You have to go, he whispered. They monitor the vitals. They know I am awake. They know someone is here. I am not leaving without you, I said. I am getting you out of here. Today. No, Leo said, trying to sit up, his body trembling with the effort. You can't. Tyler. He pays them extra for security. If you try to take me, they will kill us both. They have protocols, Dad. They will burn this room before they let the secret out. Tyler, I spat the name. He isn't paying them anything anymore, Leo. I cut him off. Leo shook his head. It is not just Tyler. It was Mom. She set it up. She made sure I could never leave. She told them I was dangerous. She told them I killed someone. I froze. What Leo closed his eyes, a look of ancient pain crossing his face. I didn't die in the crash, Dad. I didn't even crash the car. Tyler did. He was 15. He stole the keys. He hit a pedestrian. A girl. She died instantly. The room spun. I took the blame, Leo whispered. Mom begged me. She said Tyler was too young, that his life would be over. She said she would fix it. She said she would get me a good lawyer. He opened his eye again, staring into mine. She didn't get a lawyer. She staged the fire. She drugged me, Dad. She put me in the car and set it on fire. She wanted me dead so there would be no witness. She chose him. She chose Tyler. I couldn't breathe. The horror of it was a physical weight crushing my chest. My wife. The woman I had slept beside for 40 years. She hadn't just hidden him, she had tried to incinerate her own son to save her favorite. And when he survived, she buried him here. Suddenly the door behind me burst open. Step away from the patient, I turned. 2 guards filled the doorway. They were big, wearing tactical vests, batons in their hands. They didn't look like hospital security. They looked like mercenaries. I stood up. I didn't raise my hands. I put myself between the guards and my son. "You are trespassing." The lead guard barked, stepping into the room. I looked at Leo. I looked at the scars that my wife had paid for. I drew my pistol. "I am not trespassing," I said, the soldier in me taking over my voice, cold and steady. "I am a father picking up his son. And you are in my way." I held the pistol steady, my aim locked on the chest of the lead guard. The air in the room was so thick with tension, I could taste the copper on my tongue. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the beep of Leo's heart monitor speeding up a frantic staccato rhythm that matched the pounding in my own ears. "Get out," I growled, the command coming from deep in my chest. "I will put a bullet in you before you can lift that baton. Do not test me." The guard hesitated. He looked at the gun, then at my eyes. He saw what he needed to see. He saw a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. He slowly raised his hands, stepping back into the hallway. His partner followed, stumbling over his own feet. I slammed the heavy door shut and threw the deadbolt. I dragged a heavy medical cabinet across the floor and wedged it under the handle. It wouldn't hold them forever. They would call the police. They would call a SWAT team. But it bought us time. I turned back to the bed. Leo was trying to sit up again, his good hand gripping the sheets, his scarred face twisted in pain. "Dad, put the gun away," he rasped. If they come in shooting, I am taking as many of them with me as I can," I said, holstering the weapon. "But right now I need you to talk. You said Mom did this. You said Tyler was the one driving. I need to know everything, every detail." Leo slumped back against the pillows. He looked at the ceiling, his good eye tracking a water stain, as if it were a map to the past. "It was raining," he said, his voice drifting back 25 years. "It was October. The roads were slick with wet leaves. Tyler had just turned 15. He didn't have a license. He didn't know how to handle a car like that. But he wanted to impress Sarah Jenkins. I remembered Sarah. She was the girl down the street, the one Tyler was obsessed with. "He stole your keys," Leo continued. "He took the Mustang. I heard the engine start and I ran out. I jumped in the passenger seat just as he peeled out of the driveway. I tried to make him stop. I grabbed the wheel. We were fighting Dad. We were shouting. He was going too fast." Leo paused, swallowing hard. The memory was physically hurting him. We came around the curve on Miller's Road, the one near the old bridge. There was a girl walking her dog. She was wearing a yellow raincoat. Tyler didn't see her. He was looking at me, screaming that I was trying to ruin his life. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. The impact. Leo's voice dropped to a whisper. "It was loud, Dad. Louder than you think." The windshield shattered. We spun out into the ditch. I looked at Tyler. He wasn't hurt. The airbags saved him. But he was screaming. Not because he was in pain, because he saw the girl. She wasn't moving. He started crying, saying his life was over, saying he would go to jail, that he would never get into college. He was a coward even then. "So you took the blame," I said. "You told the police you were driving." Leo shook his head. "We didn't call the police, we called Mom. Meredith, my wife. The woman who sat in the front pew at church every Sunday. She arrived in 10 minutes, Leo said. She didn't run to the girl. She didn't check for a pulse. She walked straight to Tyler. She checked him for scratches. She hugged him. Then she walked over to me. I was bleeding from a cut on my forehead. I told her we had to call 911. I told her maybe the girl was still alive. And what did she say? She said no. She said Tyler had a future. She said Tyler was special. She said I was the oldest, that it was my job to protect him. She told me to get into the driver's seat. She told Tyler to get into her car. She wiped his fingerprints off the steering wheel. I felt sick, a nausea so deep it made my knees weak. Meredith had orchestrated a crime scene to frame her own son. I sat in the driver's seat, Leo continued. I thought that was it. I thought I would go to prison for vehicular manslaughter. I was ready to do it, Dad. I loved him. I loved you guys. I thought I was saving the family. He turned his head to look at me, and the anguish in his one good eye was unbearable. But then Mom came back to the window. She had a thermos. She said I was in shock. She said I needed to drink something to calm down before the police arrived. It tasted bitter, like almond extract. I stared at him. She poisoned you, sedative, Leo corrected. Strong stuff. Maybe something she got from her doctor friends. I started feeling heavy. I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't speak. I watched her through the windshield. She wasn't calling the police. She was pouring gasoline on the hood. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the mattress to keep from falling over. She poured it inside the car, Leo said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion now. She poured it on the girl's body. She poured it on me. I couldn't scream, Dad. I was paralyzed. I watched my own mother strike a match. She looked me in the eye. She didn't look sad. She looked efficient, like she was solving a math problem. Tyler was in her car watching. He didn't try to stop her. He just watched. She dropped the match. The world turned orange. The heat was instant. It woke me up. The pain cut through the drugs. I screamed. I thrashed. I managed to get the door open. I fell out onto the wet grass. I rolled. The fire was eating my clothes, eating my skin. I managed to put it out in the mud. I looked up. Mom was standing over me. She looked disappointed. Disappointed that you survived, I whispered. She made a phone call, Leo said. Not to an ambulance, to a private number. A van showed up 10 minutes later. 2 men got out. They weren't paramedics. They put me in the back. They injected me with something else. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was Mom hugging Tyler, telling him it was going to be okay, that the problem was handled. I sank into the chair beside the bed. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't make a fist. My wife. The mother of my children. She hadn't just covered up an accident. She had attempted to burn her son alive to protect the family reputation and the insurance payout. And when he survived, she didn't finish the job. No, she did something worse. She erased him. She brought me here, Leo said, gesturing to the sterile walls. Sanctuary Hills. It is a black site, Dad. A place for problems that don't go away. She paid them to keep me. She paid them to fix my face just enough so I wouldn't die from infection, but not enough to look human again. She changed my name. I became Patient 104. For 25 years I have been in this room. I watched the seasons change through that crack in the blinds. I learned to read lips from the television. I waited. Why didn't she just kill you, I asked. Why pay to keep you alive? Because she needed leverage, Leo said. Tyler, he was a mess. He always messed up. She knew that if she killed me, Tyler might crack. The guilt might break him. But as long as I was alive, she could control him. She could tell him that if he ever stepped out of line, she would stop paying the bill and let me out. I was her insurance policy against Tyler's stupidity. And the money I asked. The Memorial Fund. Laundered money, Leo said. Donations from people who thought they were helping grieving parents. Insurance settlements. She used the world's pity to pay for my prison. I stood up. The rage was a cold, hard stone in my gut. It wasn't the hot anger of a fight. It was the cold calculation of a demolition expert deciding where to place the charges. Tyler knows I asked. He found out when Mom died, Leo said. He came here once, 5 years ago. He stood right where you are standing. He looked at me. I begged him to let me go. I told him I wouldn't say anything about the accident. And what did he do? He laughed, Leo said. He said I looked like a monster. He said I was dead to the world, and it was better that way. He said the money Mom left for my care was the only inheritance he was going to get, and he wasn't going to waste it on freedom. He has been paying the minimum to keep me alive and pocketing the rest. But the money ran out, I said, connecting the final dots. That is why he is coming for my assets. He drained the fund. Leo nodded. The administrator told me last week. My account is in arrears. They were going to transfer me to a state facility for the indigent. If that happened, my fingerprints would hit the system, my DNA. The secret would be out. Tyler couldn't let that happen. So he was going to kill you, I said. He was going to stop the medication, Leo said. Let an infection take me. A quiet end. No autopsy. Just cremation. That is why I called you. I stole a phone from a nurse. I remembered the number. It was the only number I knew by heart. The home line. I didn't know if you were still alive. I didn't know if you still lived there. I put the phone in your casket, I said, my voice breaking. You put a phone in a casket filled with sandbags and animal bones, Leo said. Mom handled the funeral arrangements. Remember, I remembered. I remembered her weeping. I remembered her refusing to let me see the body, telling me she wanted me to remember him as he was. I remembered thanking her for her strength. I had been sleeping with a monster. I had raised a monster, and I had abandoned my son to hell. Outside the door, heavy boots thudded on the linoleum. A voice boomed over a megaphone. Garrett Stone, this is the state police. We have the building surrounded. Put down your weapon and come out with your hands up. Tyler didn't call the doctors. He called the cops. He reported an armed intruder. He wanted me shot. I looked at Leo. He looked terrified. Dad, don't let them take me back, he whispered. Please. I reached down and unbuckled the straps holding him to the bed. I wrapped his thin arm around my shoulder. Nobody is taking you back, I said. I walked to the window. It was reinforced glass with wire mesh. I looked out. We were on the first floor, but there was a drop. Below us, a narrow service alley ran along the side of the mountain. I grabbed the heavy oxygen tank standing in the corner. Stand back, I said. I swung the tank. The glass shattered. The wire mesh bent. I swung again and again until there was a hole big enough for a man. I am getting you out of here, Leo, I said. But Dad, the police. The police don't know who is in here, I said. They think I am a crazy old man with a gun. They don't know I found a ghost. I helped him to the window. He was light. Too light. I lifted him up. We are going to go to the one place they won't look, I said. Where the cemetery, I said. We have a funeral to crash. I lowered him out the window into the cold mountain air. I climbed out after him, my joints screaming, my heart burning. Tyler wanted a show. I was going to give him one. I was going to give him the resurrection of the brother he murdered. We moved into the shadows of the alley, leaving Sanctuary Hills behind. The sirens wailed in the distance, but they were singing the wrong song. They were hunting a man who was already gone. I checked my watch. The memorial service. The 25th anniversary service that Tyler had insisted on organizing to show off his piety. It was tomorrow at noon. We had 24 hours to get back, 24 hours to turn a lie into a weapon. I looked at Leo limping beside me, leaning on me for support. Can you make it? I asked. He looked up, his good eye blazing with a fire that 25 years of darkness hadn't extinguished. For this, he said, I could walk through hell. Good, I said, because that is exactly where we are going. The wail of the sirens wasn't fading. It was getting louder. We were 10 yards from the window, huddled behind a row of industrial dumpsters in the service alley, when the floodlights hit us. They washed over the concrete like a tidal wave of white heat, blinding me instantly. I tried to shield Leo, pushing his frail body behind the rusted metal, but it was too late. We weren't running into the darkness. We were running into a kill box. "Garrett Stone," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Drop the weapon. Step away from the patient." I gripped my pistol, my thumb hovering over the safety. I calculated the odds. 2 guards at the end of the alley. A cruiser blocking the exit ramp. A sniper likely setting up on the roof. I could take 2 of them. Maybe 3. But Leo, one stray bullet, one piece of shrapnel, and 25 years of survival would end in a fraction of a second. My burner phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. I was busy looking for a breach in their line. It vibrated again. And again. I pulled it out, keeping my eyes on the perimeter. "Unknown number," I answered. "You made it further than I thought, Dad," Tyler's voice said. He sounded calm, bored even. "But you are out of moves." "I am getting him out." "Tyler," I said, my voice scraping like sandpaper. "And then I am coming for you." "No," Tyler said. "You aren't. Because if you take one more step, I make a call. The nurse on duty, Nurse Ratched's meaner sister, she has a standing order. If patient 104 attempts to leave, she administers a sedative, a very, very strong one. It stops the heart in about 30 seconds. It looks just like natural causes." I froze. I looked down at Leo. He was shivering against the dumpster, his good eye wide with terror, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. He was at their mercy. "You wouldn't," I said. "I killed him once, Dad," Tyler said, his voice chillingly void of emotion. "Do you really think I won't do it again? I am trying to save us all the embarrassment. Put him back. Get in your truck. Come home. If you do that, he lives. He stays comfortable. If you don't, well, funerals are expensive, but I guess we can afford one more." The rage that filled me was different from before. It wasn't fire. It was ice. Absolute zero. I looked at the guards closing in. I looked at my son, broken and fragile in the hospital gown. If I fought, he died. If I surrendered, he lived to fight another day. I made the only choice a father could make. "Don't hurt him," I whispered into the phone. "I am coming back." I hung up. I turned to Leo. I grabbed his shoulders. "I have to put you back," I said, my heart breaking with every syllable. "It is the only way to keep you breathing." "Dad, no." Leo grabbed my sleeve, his grip weak. "Please, listen to me," I hissed, staring into his one good eye. "This isn't over. I am just changing the battlefield. I swear on your mother's grave I will come back for you. Trust me." He looked at me. He searched my face for the soldier he remembered. He nodded, tears mixing with the dirt on his scars. I stood up. I threw my pistol out onto the asphalt. It clattered loudly. I raised my hands. "I surrender," I shouted. "I am unarmed. I need medical assistance for the patient." The guards swarmed us. Rough hands grabbed me, slamming me against the dumpster. I didn't fight. I watched them lift Leo, handling him like a sack of laundry. They carried him back toward the broken window. He looked back at me once, just once, before he disappeared into the belly of the beast. They escorted me to the gate. They didn't arrest me. Tyler must have pulled strings, told them I was a confused old man having an episode. They just wanted me gone. "Go home, old man," the lead guard spat, shoving me toward the service road where I had stashed the truck. "Don't come back." I walked to the truck. My body felt hollowed out. I sat in the cab for 10 minutes, shaking not from fear, but from the effort of holding back the urge to drive that truck through the front doors of the facility. But I had a plan. A new plan. Tyler wanted a confused, defeated old man. I would give him one. I would give him the performance of a lifetime. I drove the 6 hours back in a trance. I rehearsed every twitch, every stammer. I needed to look like a man who had finally snapped under the weight of his own dementia. I pulled into Tyler's driveway at noon. My own house was still locked up, super glued shut. I knew he would be here, waiting. I stumbled out of the truck. I let my shoulders slump. I dragged my left leg slightly. I didn't knock. I just stood on the lawn, staring at the front door, swaying like a tree in the wind. The door opened. Tyler stood there, coffee mug in hand, Brittany peeking over his shoulder. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just won the lottery. "Welcome back to reality, Dad," he called out. I walked toward him. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I focused my eyes on a point 1,000 yards behind him. I got lost. I mumbled, my voice trembling. I was looking for Meredith. "Have you seen your mother?" Tyler's grin widened. He exchanged a look with Brittany. They bought it. "Mom is dead, Dad," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Remember, you are confused. You've had a long night chasing ghosts." I stepped into his foyer. It smelled of potpourri and expensive lies. I tried to find him. I whimpered, grabbing Tyler's arm. "Leo, he called me. But the building, it was just a wall. I couldn't get in." "There is no Leo, Dad," Tyler said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It was a dream, a bad dream." "I'm so tired," I said, clutching my chest. I let my breathing hitch. I staggered, grabbing the hallway table for support, knocking over a vase. It shattered. "Dad?" Tyler asked, stepping back to avoid the water. I let my knees buckle. I slid down the wall, gripping my left arm. I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a low groan. "My arm?" I gasped. "It feels heavy." "Oh my God!" Brittany shrieked. "He's having a stroke! Call 911!" Tyler shouted, but he didn't move to help me. He stood there watching, calculating. I could see the gears turning in his head. If I died right here, it would save him a lot of paperwork. I forced myself to open my eyes. I looked up at him, making my face slack, my speech slurred. Ty, I stammered. I don't want to go. Not like this. The house, the money." Tyler knelt down instantly. The mention of assets revived him faster than CPR. "What about the house, Dad?" he asked urgently. You take it," I wheezed. "I can't do it anymore. Too hard. The voices, too loud. I just want to rest." I reached into my jacket pocket with a shaking hand. I pulled out the crumpled power of attorney papers I had grabbed from my own desk before leaving the ones he had tried to force on me days ago. I had kept them. "Pen," I gasped. "Need sign before I go." Tyler scrambled. He practically ripped a pen from Brittany's hand. He smoothed the paper out on the floor tiles right next to my paralyzed leg. "Here, Dad," he said, guiding my hand. "Just sign right here. We will take care of everything. We will make sure you rest." I let my hand tremble violently. I made the signature look like a seismograph reading during an earthquake. It was jagged, weak, pathetic. It was perfect. "There," I breathed, letting the pen roll away. "Done. Yours. All yours." Tyler snatched the paper. He stared at the signature, his eyes gleaming. He had it. The keys to the kingdom. The legal authority to strip me bare. "You did the right thing, Dad," he said, standing up. He didn't look worried about my stroke anymore. He looked ecstatic. Brittany, cancel the ambulance. He is stabilizing. Help me get him to the guest room. Cancel it, Brittany asked. But he is fine, Tyler snapped. It was just a TIA, a mini stroke. Stress. He needs sleep, not a hospital bill. Besides, we have control now. We can put him in a home tomorrow. They hauled me up. I was dead weight in their arms. They dragged me to the guest bedroom and dumped me on the bed. Rest now, old man, Tyler whispered, patting my cheek. It wasn't affectionate. It was a dismissal. They left the room. I heard the door lock from the outside. I lay in the dark, listening to their muffled celebration in the kitchen. I heard the pop of a champagne cork. They were toasting to my demise. They were toasting to their inheritance. I stopped shaking. I sat up. I rotated my shoulder, working out the stiffness. My stroke had vanished as quickly as it arrived. I looked at the window. The sun was setting. Tyler had the papers. He thought he had the power. He thought I was a vegetable rotting in his spare room. He would be careless now. He would be arrogant. He didn't know that the signature I gave him was on a document that my lawyer Alan had already flagged as void in the system 3 hours ago. He didn't know that by signing it, I had just given him the rope to hang himself. And he definitely didn't know about the phone call I was about to make. I pulled the second burner phone from my sock, the one they hadn't found. I dialed a number I hadn't used since my days contracting for private military security in the Gulf. Sanders, a voice answered. Gravel and iron. It's Stone, I said. I need a crew. 5 men. Heavy extraction gear. And a hearse. A hearse? Sanders asked. Who died? Nobody, I said, staring at the locked door. But tomorrow at noon, we are going to wake the dead. The morning sun hit the dust motes dancing in the guest bedroom, but I did not move. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations. 1, 2, 3. My body was rigid, my limbs heavy, not because I was paralyzed, but because I was in character. For the last 12 hours, I had been a ghost in my own life. I let them feed me soup that tasted like dishwater. I let them change the channel on the TV to mind-numbing reality shows. I let them talk about me as if I were already dead. Outside the door, I heard the clatter of heels on hardwood. Brittany was pacing. We need to list the house by Friday, she was saying, her voice sharp and loud. The market is cooling off, Tyler. If we wait until he is actually gone, we might lose 10%. He is not going to be gone by Friday. Tyler replied, his voice muffled by a mouthful of toast. He is stable. The doctor said it was a TIA. He could last for years in a home. We have the power of attorney now. We can list it whenever we want. I already called the realtor. She is coming over at 2. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth creaked. They were selling my house before I had even left it. They were carving up the carcass while the heart was still beating. The door handle turned. I let my jaw go slack. I let my eyes drift out of focus. I became the vegetable they wanted me to be. Tyler walked in. He was wearing one of my old flannel shirts. It was too big for him. He looked like a child playing dress-up. He stood over the bed looking down at me with a mixture of disgust and triumph. "Morning, Dad," he said loudly. "You awake in there?" I made a low groaning sound in my throat. I tried to lift my hand and let it flop back onto the mattress. Weak, helpless. Tyler smirked. He patted my leg. "Good news. We found a place for you. Sunny Meadows. It is nice. They have bingo. We are going to move you there on Monday." Monday. That gave me 48 hours. I didn't need 48. I needed 24. I wet my lips. I made my voice sound like dry leaves scraping on pavement. Ty. He leaned in. "What, you want water? No," I wheezed. "Leo." Tyler recoiled. Don't start with that again, Dad. Leo is gone. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was trembling, but I put just enough strength into it to keep him there. 25 years, I whispered. Tomorrow. Tyler frowned. He pulled his phone out and checked the date. His eyes widened. Huh. You are right. Tomorrow is the 25th anniversary. I forgot. I squeezed his wrist. Memorial, I rasped. Big service. Please. Before I go. Tyler pulled his arm away. A memorial, Dad, we don't have time for a party. We have movers coming. We have inspections. People need to know, I said, putting every ounce of pathetic desperation I could muster into my voice. Everyone. The town. The partners. Show them we remember. I saw the gears turning in his head. I saw the exact moment greed shook hands with vanity. A memorial service. A public display of grief. It was the perfect cover. If he threw a lavish service for his dead brother while caring for his invalid father, he would look like a saint. It would smooth over any rumors about my sudden decline. It would make the asset seizure look like a necessary burden he was bravely shouldering. And more importantly, he could invite his creditors. He could invite the investors he was trying to woo for his failing startups. He could show them that he was now the head of the Stone family, the executor of the estate. He smiled. It was a shark's smile. You know what, Dad, that is a beautiful idea. A tribute to Leo and to you, a passing of the torch. He walked to the door, calling out for Brittany. Babe, cancel the realtor. We are having a funeral tomorrow. I listened as they planned it. They didn't come back into the room. They sat in the kitchen drinking my coffee, spending my money. They talked about caterers. They talked about inviting the mayor. They talked about which wine would pair best with a 25-year-old tragedy. They were so busy planning their big show, they didn't hear me slide the burner phone from under the mattress. I dialed Sanders. He answered on the first ring. Status. I asked, my voice dropping, the tremor returning to the steel of the foreman. We are in position, Sanders said. We have eyes on the facility. Shift change is in 20 minutes. That is our window. Do you have the transport? Ambulance is prepped. We have a doctor on board. A real one, not a payroll hack. Good, I said. The target is in room 104, East Wing, ground floor. There is a window that has already been compromised. You will see the patch job. Go through there. Resistance, Sanders asked. Heavy. Private security. They are armed and they are paid to keep secrets. Rules of engagement are simple. Do not kill anyone unless you have to, but get him out, no matter what. Copy that. Extraction in T-15 minutes. I hung up. I slid the phone back under the mattress. Now I had to wait. The hours dragged. I lay in that bed, my body aching from inactivity, my mind racing at 100 miles an hour. I replayed the plan. I looked for holes. If Sanders failed, Leo was dead. If Sanders succeeded but got stopped on the highway, Leo was dead. If Tyler checked on me and found the phone, Leo was dead. The stakes were absolute. At noon, Brittany came in with a suit. It was my black Sunday suit, the one I wore to church. She held it up against my prone body. This will do, she said. It is a little loose, but you are sitting in a wheelchair anyway. Nobody will notice. She didn't ask if I wanted to wear it. She didn't ask if I was feeling up to it. She just hung it on the door and left. To her, I was a prop, a piece of scenery for her husband's big day. At 2 p.m., my burner phone vibrated against the box springs. One short buzz. That was the signal. The package is secure. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. They had him. Leo was out. He was in a rolling ICU heading down the interstate. Now I just had to get him to the cemetery. That night, Tyler came in to check on me one last time. He smelled of scotch. He was celebrating early. "Big day tomorrow, Dad," he said, swaying slightly. "Everyone is coming, even Henderson. I invited him personally. I want him to see that I am taking care of things." I stared at him. I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself not to strangle him. He leaned close, his face inches from mine. "You are going to be good tomorrow, right? You are going to sit there, and you are going to nod, and you are going to look sad. And when people ask how you are going to drool a little and let me do the talking." He tapped my cheek. "Because if you don't, if you try anything, remember what I told you about the nursing home? I found one that is even cheaper. It is in the basement of an old building in Detroit. They don't have windows." "You understand," I blinked. Once. Slowly. "Good boy," he whispered. He turned off the light and closed the door. I lay in the darkness, listening to the lock click. Good boy. I wasn't a good boy. I was a soldier. I was a father. And tomorrow I was going to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I slept for 3 hours. Dreamless, efficient sleep. I woke up at dawn. I could hear the birds singing outside, oblivious to the war that was about to start. At 10 a.m. they came for me. Tyler and Brittany dressed me like a doll. They pulled my arms through the jacket sleeves. They tied my tie. They had rented a wheelchair, a heavy medical transport chair with straps. "Safety first," Brittany said, buckling me in. "We don't want you falling out during the eulogy." They wheeled me out to the van. The sun was bright. Too bright. It hurt my eyes after the darkness of the room. The drive to the cemetery was short. We passed the church where Meredith and I were married. We passed the school where Leo and Tyler played football. Every corner of this town was a memory, and every memory was now tainted by the lie we had lived. We pulled through the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood Cemetery. It was packed. Tyler hadn't lied. There were cars lined up along the grass verge. A large white tent had been erected near the family plot. Rows of white folding chairs were filled with people in black. I saw faces I knew. Neighbors, former employees, people I had built houses for. They looked at the van as we pulled up, their expressions somber, respectful. They were here to honor a tragedy. They had no idea they were about to witness a resurrection. Tyler wheeled me out of the van. He pushed me over the uneven grass. The wheels bumped and jarred, sending shocks of pain up my spine, but I kept my head lolled to the side, my mouth slightly open. He parked me in the front row, right next to the podium. He locked the brakes. There he whispered in my ear, "Front row seat. Try not to embarrass us." He walked up to the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the crowd. He looked handsome, confident. The grieving brother. The dutiful son. Brittany sat next to me holding a lace handkerchief ready to dab non-existent tears. I looked around. I scanned the perimeter. I was looking for a black SUV. I was looking for Sanders. I didn't see them. Panic flared in my chest. A cold spark. Had they been stopped? Had Leo crashed? Tyler started speaking. "Friends, family, neighbors," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "We are here today to remember a light that was extinguished too soon. My brother Leo." He paused for effect. A hush fell over the crowd. 25 years ago, we lost him, and a part of us died with him. My mother, Meredith, she never recovered. And my father... He gestured to me. The crowd turned to look. I saw pity in their eyes. I saw sorrow. My father is here with us today, but his heart is broken. His mind is tired. He wanted this service. He wanted to say goodbye one last time before he rests. He was burying me. Right there in front of everyone. He was writing my epitaph while I sat breathing 5 feet away. I kept scanning. Where were they? But even through the pain, Tyler continued, even through the loss, we find strength. We find a way to move forward. Leo would have wanted that. He would have wanted us to protect what he left behind. I heard it then. Faint at first. The rumble of a heavy engine. Not a car, a truck. It was coming from the service entrance behind the mausoleums. Tyler heard it too. He faltered. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. A black Sprinter van tore around the corner. It wasn't driving respectfully. It was driving fast. It kicked up dirt and gravel. The crowd murmured. People stood up, craning their necks. The van screeched to a halt 20 yards from the tent. The side door slid open with a mechanical, violently loud slam. Tyler stopped speaking. He gripped the podium. I felt the vibration of the phone in my jacket pocket. 3 buzzes. The Eagle has landed. I sat up. I straightened my spine. I lifted my head. I closed my mouth. Brittany gasped. She grabbed my arm. Garrett. What are you doing? I shook her hand off. I didn't look at her. I looked at the van. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. They reached into the back. They pulled out a wheelchair. But this wasn't a transport chair. This was a high-tech medical chair with oxygen tanks and monitors attached. And sitting in it, wrapped in a blanket, was a man with half a face. A gasp rippled through the crowd, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the tent. Tyler went pale. Ghost pale. He stepped back from the podium, knocking over a vase of lilies. No, he whispered. The microphone picked it up. It boomed across the cemetery. No. Sanders stepped out of the driver's seat. He walked to the back of the wheelchair and began to push it. He pushed it straight down the center aisle, parting the sea of black coats. The man in the chair lifted his head. The sun hit the scars. It hit the milky white eye. And it hit the blue eye. Leo Stone had come home. I reached down and unlocked the brakes of my wheelchair. I stood up. My legs were stiff. My knee screamed. But I stood. I walked to the podium. Tyler was frozen paralyzed by the ghost approaching him. I shoved him aside. He stumbled, almost falling into the open grave plot. I grabbed the microphone. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the faces of the people who had pitied me, who had believed the lie. I pointed at the man in the wheelchair. You all came here to mourn a dead boy, I said, my voice booming, strong and angry. But I have bad news for you. I looked at Tyler, who was shaking his head, tears of terror streaming down his face. The coffin is empty, I said. The smell of lilies in the midday sun was thick enough to choke a man. It was a cloying, sweet scent that I had always associated with death, but today it smelled like something else. It smelled like fraud. I sat strapped into that medical transport chair, my head lolling to the right, a line of drool that I had carefully manufactured, drying on my chin. I was the perfect prop, the broken father, the silent tragedy that gave Tyler's performance the weight of legitimacy. From my vantage point in the front row, I could see everything. I saw the rows of black-clad mourners, people who had known me for 30 years, looking at me with that specific brand of pity that makes your skin crawl. They whispered behind their hands, "Poor Garrett. He has lost his mind. It is a mercy, really. He doesn't know what is happening." They were wrong. I knew exactly what was happening. I was watching a masterclass in hypocrisy. Tyler stood at the podium, bathed in a shaft of sunlight that made him look like a corrupted angel. He had practiced his expression in the mirror. I was sure of it. It was a perfect balance of stoic strength and vulnerability. He gripped the sides of the lectern, his knuckles white, pausing for effect before he spoke. "We are not just here to mourn, Tyler," said his voice catching in his throat, just enough to sound genuine. "We are here to remember the promise of a life cut short." Leo was more than a brother. He was my compass. When we lost him 25 years ago, I promised myself I would live a life worthy of his memory. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. A life worthy of his memory. "You killed him," I thought, the rage simmering in my gut, like molten lead. "You smashed his body in a car wreck, watched your mother burn him to hide your crime, and then spent a quarter of a century spending the money meant to keep him alive. And now you stand there wearing a suit paid for by my credit card, lying to God and everyone else." Tyler continued, launching into a story about how Leo had once saved a stray dog from a frozen river. It was a good story. It was also a lie. I was the one who pulled that dog out. Tyler had been inside watching cartoons, but the crowd ate it up. I saw handkerchiefs dabbing at eyes. I saw heads nodding in solemn agreement. He was rewriting history, painting himself as the grieving survivor who had carried the torch of the family honor. Beside me, Brittany shifted in her folding chair. She wasn't listening to her husband. She was busy conducting business. She leaned toward her cousin, a woman named Sheila, who worked in interior design, and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "It is a tragedy, of course," Brittany hissed, checking her manicure. "But we have to be practical. The house is just too much for Tyler to manage along with his grief. We are going to list it on Monday." I kept my eyes glazed, staring at a patch of grass near the open grave, but my ears were tuned to their frequency. "Monday," Sheila whispered back. "That is fast. Is the market good?" "Oh, it is booming," Brittany replied, a greedy excitement creeping into her tone. "We already have a cash offer from a developer. They want to tear it down and put up condos. We are looking at 800,000 easy. And with the old man, well, with Garrett in the facility, our expenses will be minimal. We are thinking of taking a trip to Italy in the fall. To decompose. I mean decompose, no decompress. We need to heal." She was spending the money from my home, the home I built with my own hands, on a vacation, while I was sitting right next to her. She patted my arm, a gesture for the crowd to see. "He doesn't understand anything anymore," she told Sheila, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "The doctor says his brain is like Swiss cheese. It is a blessing, honestly. He won't suffer when we move him. He won't even know he has moved." I wanted to reach out and snap her finger. I wanted to tell her that my brain was sharp enough to remember the combination to every safe I owned, and the access codes to the accounts she was trying to drain. But I held still. Discipline. The trap had to be perfect. Tyler was winding down. He wiped a tear from his eye. A real tear. Probably not. He was an actor, and this was his greatest role. And so he said, looking directly at me with a sad, loving smile that made my stomach turn, "I make a vow today. I vow to take care of this family, to protect my father in his twilight years, just as Leo would have wanted. I will carry this burden. I will be the rock." The crowd murmured their approval. What a good son. What a noble man. The priest stepped forward to give the final blessing over the empty grave. He spoke of dust returning to dust. He spoke of the peace of the afterlife. He had no idea that the afterlife was a room with reinforced glass 300 miles away, and that the dust was about to kick down the door. I felt the vibration in my pocket. 3 buzzes, then a long one. That was the signal. Sanders was at the gate. The sound of the heavy diesel engine rumbled in the distance, growing louder, cutting through the priest's prayer. Heads turned. Tyler frowned, looking annoyed that his moment was being interrupted. I reached down to the side of my wheelchair. My hand, which had been limp and trembling for the last hour, became a claw of iron. I flipped the locking lever on the right wheel. Click. Then the left. Click. Brittany heard it. She looked down at me, confusion clouding her heavy makeup. "Garrett," she whispered. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at her. I looked at Tyler. He was staring at the black van, tearing across the cemetery lawn, his face losing its color. He knew that van. He didn't know who was in it, but he knew that chaos was coming. I placed my hands on the armrests of the chair. I pushed. My triceps flared. My bad knee locked. I stood up. A gasp went through the front row. Sheila dropped her purse. Brittany let out a small, strangled squeak and scrambled backward, her chair tipping over in the grass. "He is standing," someone shouted. It is a miracle it wasn't a miracle. It was reckoning. I stood to my full height, 6'2" of anger and adrenaline. I straightened my tie. I brushed the imaginary dust off the lapel of my suit. I looked down at Brittany, who was sprawling in the grass, staring up at me as if I were a corpse that had just climbed out of the earth. "I am not decomposing, Brittany," I said, my voice clear and hard, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "And you are not going to Italy." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She scrambled backward on her hands and knees, like a crab, terrified by the clarity in my eyes. I stepped over her legs. I walked toward the podium. My gait was stiff, but I didn't stumble. I marched like I was on parade. Tyler saw me coming. He gripped the microphone stand as if it were a weapon. His eyes darted from me to the van, screeching to a halt, then back to me. The realization was hitting him like a slow-motion train wreck. The stroke, the paralysis, the signature. It was all a lie. "Dad," and he stammered into the mic, the speakers amplifying his fear. "Dad, sit down. You are sick. You are—" I reached the podium. I didn't ask for the microphone. I took it from his hand. He was too weak, too shocked to resist. I shoved him. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a shove meant to move an obstacle. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, and landed hard on the edge of the open grave plot, his expensive shoes dangling over the emptiness. The crowd went silent. Dead silent. The only sound was the idling engine of the black van behind us and the wind rustling the tent flaps. I looked out at them. My neighbors. My friends. The people who had watched me build this town. "You all listened to a very pretty story," I said, my voice booming through the PA system. "A story about a hero brother and a loving son. A story about a tragic accident and a grieving mother." I paused. I looked at Tyler, who was trying to scramble to his feet, his face a mask of pure terror. "But I am an old builder," I continued. "And I know that a house built on a lie will always collapse. Today we are going to tear the foundation down." I pointed to the van as the side door slid open with a violent mechanical thud. "Tyler told you he was burying his brother's memory today," I said. My eyes locked on my son. "But he lied. Because you cannot bury a man who is still breathing." Sanders stepped out. He pulled the wheelchair ramp down, and then he wheeled out the man with half a face. The scream that came out of Tyler's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart by its own sins. I looked at the crowd, at the horror and confusion dawning on their faces. "I told you the coffin was empty," I said into the microphone. I turned to Tyler. "But don't worry, son. I suspect we are going to need a cell very soon, and I think you will fit in it just fine." I stood at the podium looking down at my son, who was scrambling in the dirt like a trapped rat. The silence in the cemetery was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered the wind and the birds. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on me, eyes that had moments ago been filled with pity for the senile old man in the wheelchair. Now they were wide with confusion and fear. They saw a man standing tall, a man with iron in his spine and fire in his eyes. They saw Garrett Stone, the foreman, the builder, the man who didn't break. Tyler tried to stand up. His expensive suit was stained with mud, his hair disheveled. He looked at me, then at the crowd, then at the black van idling on the grass. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He was drowning in the open air. I leaned into the microphone. The feedback squealed a high, piercing sound that made everyone flinch. "You want to know why I am not reading the eulogy Tyler wrote for me?" I asked, my voice booming across the rows of white chairs. "Because eulogies are for the dead, and we are not here to bury anyone today. We are here to dig up the truth." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I didn't bother with Bluetooth or cables. I simply held the speaker of the phone directly against the microphone of the podium. My hand was steady. I pressed play. The sound of Tyler's voice crackled through the PA system, amplified 1,000 times. It was the call he had made to me the night I tried to rescue Leo. The call where he thought he had won. "I killed him once, Dad. Do you really think I won't do it again? I am trying to save us all the embarrassment. Put him back. Get in your truck. Come home. If you do that, he lives. If you don't, well, funerals are expensive, but I guess we can afford one more." The recording ended. I didn't turn it off immediately. I let the static hiss for a few seconds, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It started in the front row and rolled back like a wave. People turned to each other, their faces pale, their hands covering their mouths. Sheila, the interior designer who had been plotting my home renovation 5 minutes ago, looked as if she might faint. Tyler froze. He stopped trying to stand. He knelt in the grass, staring at the speakers as if they were demons. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and waxen. He looked at Brittany. Brittany was standing by the overturned wheelchair, her hands gripping her pearl necklace so hard the string snapped. Pearls cascaded onto the grass, bouncing off the metal frame of the chair, but she didn't notice. She was staring at her husband with a look of pure revulsion and terror. She knew that voice. She knew that tone. But hearing it broadcast to the mayor, to the neighbors, to the investors, it was the sound of her life ending. "That is a lie," Tyler screamed, suddenly scrambling to his feet. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That is fake. He used AI. He edited it. He is crazy. Don't listen to him. He has dementia." He looked around the crowd, his eyes wild, pleading for someone, anyone, to believe him. "It is a deep fake," he shouted, his voice cracking. "My father is sick. He is trying to ruin me." I didn't argue. I didn't shout back. I just looked at Sanders, who was standing by the sliding door of the black van. I nodded once. Sanders grabbed the handle. He slid the door back with a heavy mechanical slam that echoed off the mausoleums. The ramp motor whirred. Slowly, methodically, the metal ramp extended from the van and touched the cemetery grass. "Look," I commanded into the microphone. "Look at the lie." Sanders walked up the ramp. He grabbed the handles of the medical wheelchair. He began to back it down. The crowd stood up. They couldn't help it. It was a magnetic pull, a morbid curiosity mixed with primal fear. They craned their necks. They climbed onto chairs. Sanders spun the chair around at the bottom of the ramp. Leo sat there. He was wrapped in a dark wool blanket, but his face was exposed to the noon sun. The light was unforgiving. It illuminated the shiny, twisted ridges of the burn scars that covered the left side of his face. It highlighted the missing ear, the skin that looked like melted wax. It showed the milky white blindness of his left eye, but it also showed his right eye, that piercing stone blue eye, the same eye that stared out from the high school graduation photo printed on the funeral program everyone was holding. Sanders pushed him forward. The wheels crunched on the gravel path. The crowd parted. They didn't just move aside, they recoiled. They stepped back, stumbling over each other, terrified by the sight of the man who was supposed to be 6 feet under their feet. A woman screamed. It was a short, sharp sound that cut through the murmurs. Leo didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the graves. He looked straight ahead. He looked at his brother. Tyler stopped screaming. He stopped denying. He went rigid. His eyes bulged. He began to shake violently, a tremor that started in his hands and took over his entire body. He looked like he was having a seizure standing up. He backed away. He took one step, then another, his expensive Italian shoes slipping on the grass. He bumped into the podium, but he didn't feel it. He was trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Leo Sanders pushed the chair until he was 10 feet away from Tyler. He locked the brakes. Leo slowly lifted his good hand. He pulled the blanket down, revealing his withered arm, his scarred neck. He took a breath. It was a wheezing, raspy sound amplified by the silence of the graveyard. "Hello, Tyler," Leo said. His voice was damaged rough, like gravel in a mixer, but it carried. It was the voice of the grave. Tyler made a sound deep in his throat, a whimper of pure animal terror. He shook his head back and forth, a doll with a broken neck. "You are dead," he whispered. "I saw you burn. I saw you die." "You saw what you wanted to see," Leo said. "You saw a way out. You saw an insurance policy." Brittany let out a sob and covered her face. She tried to run. She turned on her heel, her heels sinking into the soft earth, but she didn't get far. Two of Sanders's men, dressed in black suits, stepped out from behind the tent and blocked her path. She collapsed to her knees, weeping hysterically, ruining her designer dress in the mud. The crowd was in chaos now. People were shouting questions. Some were crying. The mayor was on his phone furiously whispering to someone, probably the police chief. I stepped down from the podium. I walked over to stand beside Leo. I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt his bones through his thin shirt. He was frail, but in that moment he was the strongest man in the world. I looked at Tyler. "You told them he was a hero," I said, my voice calm and cold. "You told them he saved a dog. You told them you would carry his burden." I pointed at Leo. "Carry it then. Look at him. Look at what you bought with your silence. Look at what you paid for with my money." Tyler fell to his knees. He wasn't praying. He was collapsing. The weight of the truth had finally crushed him. He looked up at Leo, tears streaming down his face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. "It wasn't my fault," he blubbered. "Mom did it. Mom made me. I was just a kid. I was scared." "You were 15, Leo said, his voice cutting through Tyler's excuses. "I was 20. I gave up my life for you. I sat in a room for 25 years for you. And when you found out, when you came to see me, you didn't save me. You left me there. You stole the money meant to keep me alive, and you left me to rot." I needed the money," Tyler stammered. "The business. The debts. You needed a brother," I roared, my anger flaring hot and bright. "You needed a father. But you chose money. You chose to be a parasite." I looked at the crowd. "This is the man you admired," I shouted. "This is the grieving brother, a man who drove a car into an innocent girl, killed her, and let his brother burn to cover it up. A man who kept his own flesh and blood in a cage to pay for his BMW and his gambling addiction." The crowd turned on him. I could feel it. The pity evaporated, replaced by a collective wave of disgust. They looked at Tyler like he was something they had scraped off their shoe. Tyler looked around, realizing he had lost his audience. He had lost his reputation. He had lost everything. He looked at Brittany, but she wouldn't look at him. She was curled in a ball on the grass, sobbing about how she didn't know, how she was innocent. Another lie. Tyler looked at me. His eyes were filled with hate. "You ruin everything," he spat. "You should have just died. You should have just had a stroke and died." I smiled. It was a grim, humorless smile. I am a builder's son, I said. I don't die until the job is done. And the job isn't done until the trash is taken out. I looked toward the cemetery gates. Blue and red lights flashed against the stone pillars. Sirens wailed, getting closer. Alan Henderson had done his job. The cavalry had arrived. I looked down at my son kneeling in the dirt, a king of nothing. Your ride is here, I said. Tyler looked at the approaching police cars. He looked at the open grave behind him. For a second I thought he might jump in. I thought he might try to bury himself to escape the shame. But he didn't. He just slumped forward, his forehead touching the grass, defeated, broken, and utterly alone. Leo reached out and took my hand. His grip was stronger now. It is over, Dad, he whispered. I looked at him. I looked at the scars that would never heal the years that could never be returned. No, son, I said, squeezing his hand. It is just beginning. The sirens cut out as 4 police cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking the wrought iron gates of the cemetery, effectively sealing us inside the very trap Tyler had set for me. The lights flashed rhythmically, painting the white tent and the black suits of the mourners in strobes of red and blue. It was the lighting a crime scene deserved. Chief Miller stepped out of the lead car. I had known Miller for 30 years. We fished the same river. He was a good man, a man of the law, but today his face was hard as granite. He didn't look like a friend. He looked like Judgment Day. He adjusted his belt, his hand resting near his holster, and walked onto the grass flanked by 4 uniformed officers. Tyler scrambled to his feet, wiping mud from his expensive suit. He tried to compose himself, tried to summon the arrogance that had carried him through life, but his eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Chief, thank God, he shouted, his voice cracking. Arrest him! My father has snapped. He kidnapped this man. He is holding him hostage. He is dangerous. Miller didn't even look at Tyler. He walked straight past him, straight to the wheelchair where Leo sat shivering under the blanket. Miller took off his hat. He looked at the scars, at the ruin of a face that had once been a handsome boy. He looked into the one blue eye that remained. Leo Stone Miller asked, his voice gentle. Leo nodded. I am here, Chief. Miller let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since he got the call. He turned slowly to face Tyler. The look of disgust on his face was enough to make a lesser man wither. Tyler Stone Miller said, his voice carrying over the wind. You are under arrest. Tyler laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. For what? For organizing a funeral. For kidnapping Miller, listed ticking the crimes off on his fingers. For unlawful imprisonment. For conspiracy to commit murder. For grand larceny. And for 25 counts of insurance fraud. Tyler took a step back, shaking his head. No. No, you don't understand. That was Mom. Meredith did that. She set it up. I just didn't stop it. You cashed the checks, Tyler, I said, stepping forward. I held up the blue folder. Alan Henderson had compiled the paper trail of a lifetime of theft. I walked over to Chief Miller and handed it to him. It is all in there, Chief, I said loud enough for the stunned crowd to hear. Every withdrawal from the Leo Stone Memorial Fund. Every transfer to Sanctuary Hills. And the withdrawals he made for himself. The new car. The vacations. The gambling debts. He paid for his life with his brother's blood. Tyler lunged for the folder, but 2 officers grabbed him. They slammed him against the side of the hearse, the very vehicle he had hired to carry an empty coffin. The sound of metal cuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had heard in 25 years. You can't do this, Tyler screamed as they wrenched his arms behind his back. I am the executor. I have power of attorney. You have nothing, I said, standing over him. You signed a document that was already voided. You tried to sell a house you don't own. You are bankrupt, Tyler, morally and financially. Brittany tried to slip away. She was inching toward the parking lot, her heels sinking into the soft earth, trying to blend into the crowd of horrified onlookers. "Grab her too," Miller ordered. "No!" Brittany shrieked as a female officer took hold of her arm. "I didn't do anything. I didn't know." "He told me Leo was dead. I am a victim." I walked over to her. She looked at me, her mascara running down her face, her designer dress stained with grass and mud. "You knew, Brittany," I said, my voice cold. "You knew the money was coming from somewhere. You knew we weren't rich, but you spent like we were. You wore diamonds bought with the money meant for Leo's medication. You pushed to put me in a home so you could drain the rest. You aren't a victim. You are a parasite." The officer cuffed her. She began to wail, a sound devoid of dignity, screaming at Tyler, blaming him, cursing him for ruining her life. They dragged her toward a cruiser, her feet dragging in the dirt, leaving 2 long furrows in the manicured lawn. Tyler was still pressed against the hearse. He twisted his head to look at me. His eyes were wet, his face a mask of pure desperation. "Dad, please," he begged. "Don't let them take me. I am your son. I am the only one left. Who is going to take care of you? Who is going to carry on?" The name, I looked at him. I looked for the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to catch a baseball, the boy I had forgiven time and time again. I didn't see him. I saw a stranger, a man who had looked at his brother suffering in a cage and decided to buy a BMW instead of a key. "I am not alone, Tyler," I said. I turned and walked back to the wheelchair. I put my hand on Leo's shoulder. "I have my son," I said. "I have the son who took the blame to save you, the son who burned for you, the son who sat in the dark for 25 years and never once stopped loving his family, even when his family threw him away." I looked back at Tyler. "You are not a stone. Stones are builders. We create things. We protect things. You just consume. You destroy." "Dad." "Don't call me that," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "My son died 25 years ago in a car crash caused by a reckless child. Today I buried that reckless child. You are a ghost to me, Tyler. You don't exist." Miller nodded to his officers. "Get him out of here." They hauled Tyler toward the squad car. He fought them, kicking and screaming, begging the neighbors to help him, begging the mayor to intervene. But nobody moved. They watched him with cold eyes. They had seen the monster beneath the suit. As they shoved him into the back seat, he looked at me one last time through the window. He looked small. He looked terrified. He looked exactly like the coward he was. The car pulled away, lights flashing. Brittany followed in the second car. The silence returned to the cemetery. It was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't heavy. It was clean. The air felt lighter, as if a poison had been sucked out of the atmosphere. The crowd began to disperse. They didn't come up to shake my hand. They didn't offer condolences. They just walked away, heads down, ashamed to have been part of the charade, ashamed that they had believed the lie. They left me alone with my son. Sanders and his men stood by the van, a respectful distance away. I knelt beside the wheelchair. I looked at Leo. He was crying silently, tears tracking through the valleys of his scars. "Is he gone?" he whispered. "He is gone," I said. "He can't hurt you anymore." "The walls are down, Leo. You are free." Leo reached out with his good hand. His fingers brushed my cheek. His skin was rough like parchment paper, but his touch was warm. "I missed you, Dad," he said. "I broke then." The soldier vanished. The foreman vanished. I was just an old man weeping in a graveyard, holding the hand of the boy I thought I had lost forever. "I missed you too, son," I choked out. "I missed you every single day." I stood up and wiped my face. I took the handles of the wheelchair. "Ready to go home?" I asked. Leo nodded. Home, he said, testing the word, as if it were a flavor he hadn't tasted in decades. Yes. Home. I pushed him down the path, past the open grave, past the empty chairs, past the lies of the past. The sun was high in the sky now, burning away the last of the morning mist. We had lost 25 years. We had lost Meredith. We had lost Tyler. But as I loaded my son into the van, as I sat beside him and watched the cemetery fade into the distance, I knew one thing for certain. We had won the war. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation was solid. The smell of fresh cedar sawdust is the best smell in the world. It smells like progress. It smells like the future. For 40 years, I smelled it on job sites while building skyscrapers and office parks. But today, it smells different, because today I am building a ramp for my son. It has been 6 months since the day the police cars took my youngest son away in handcuffs and left me standing in a cemetery with my oldest. 6 months of lawyers and depositions and the slow grinding gears of justice. Tyler and Brittany pleaded guilty. They had no choice. The evidence was a mountain they could not climb. They were sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. I did not go to the sentencing. I did not need to see them in orange jumpsuits to know they were gone. They chose their cages a long time ago. I sold the big house. I couldn't sleep there anymore. The walls whispered with 25 years of lies. Every room was a reminder of Meredith's deception and Tyler's greed. I sold it to the developer just like Tyler wanted, but the check didn't go into his pocket. It went into building this place. We bought a plot of land by the lake about an hour outside of town. It is quiet here. The only sounds are the wind in the pines and the water lapping against the shore. I designed the house myself. It is a single-story ranch, open concept, wide hallways, no steps. It is a house built for a wheelchair, but it doesn't feel like a hospital. It feels like a home. I put down my sander and wiped the sweat from my forehead. I looked out at the deck. Leo was sitting there wrapped in a thick cardigan watching the sunset. The evening light was kind to him. It softened the jagged edges of his scars. He still wore the mask of the fire on the left side of his face, but on the right he looked like himself. He looked like the boy who used to run through the sprinklers in the summer. I walked over to him. The wheels of his chair hummed softly on the smooth wood of the deck. "Hey, Dad," he said without turning his head. "The water looks calm tonight." "It does," I said, leaning against the railing next to him. "Good night for fishing tomorrow." Leo smiled. It was a crooked smile because of the scar tissue, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "I would like that," he said. "I haven't been fishing in a long time." I put my hand on his shoulder. "We have time, son. We have all the time in the world. The doctors say he is getting stronger. The physical therapy is brutal, but Leo attacks it with a ferocity that makes me proud. He is learning to walk again with a cane. It is slow, painful work, but he never complains. He spent 25 years in a bed. He says a little pain is a small price to pay for standing on his own 2 feet. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of the Nokia phone. The gray brick that had started it all. I had kept it charged on my nightstand for 6 months. A reminder. A talisman. But I didn't need reminders anymore. Leo saw it in my hand. His expression changed. The shadow of room 104 crossed his face. "You still have it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "It saved our lives, Leo. But it belongs to the past." He looked at the phone, then out at the lake. The water was deep blue, turning black as the sun dipped below the tree line. "Then let it go," he said. I walked down the ramp I had just finished sanding. I walked out onto the wooden dock that stretched into the water. The boards creaked under my boots. I walked to the very end. I looked at the phone one last time. The screen was dark. The battery had finally died this morning, and I hadn't recharged it. It was just a piece of plastic and circuitry now. It was the vessel that had carried a ghost's voice back to the living, but the ghost was gone. The man was here. I thought about Meredith. I thought about the woman I had loved for 40 years, who had turned out to be a stranger. I thought about the secrets she kept, the money she laundered, the son she sacrificed. I wondered if she was watching us from somewhere. I hoped she was. I hoped she saw that her plan failed. I hoped she saw that love, real, messy, stubborn love, was stronger than her control. I thought about Tyler sitting in a cell, wondering where it all went wrong, blaming everyone but himself. He would rot there, and I would never visit him. He was the one who was truly dead to me. I pulled my arm back. I threw the phone as hard as I could. It sailed through the air, a gray arc against the twilight sky. It hit the water 50 yards out. There was a small splash. Ripples spread outward, disturbing the reflection of the moon, then faded. The phone sank. Down into the silt and the mud. Down into the dark where secrets belong. I stood there for a long time, watching the water smooth over. I felt lighter. The weight of the last 25 years, the grief, the anger, the confusion, it all sank with that phone. I turned around and walked back up the dock. Leo was waiting for me on the deck. The porch lights had come on, casting a warm yellow glow over the house. "Did it sink?" he asked. "Like a stone," I said. "Good," he said. "Now what?" "Now," I said, walking behind his chair to push him inside toward the smell of dinner cooking on the stove. "Now we live." I am 71 years old. My hands are calloused, my knees ache, and my heart has been broken more times than a man should have to endure. But as I sat down to dinner with my son, as we broke bread in a house built on truth, I realized something. Legacy isn't about the money you leave behind. It isn't about the buildings you erect or the name you carve on a tombstone. Legacy is the people you protect. It is the truth you defend when everyone else is lying. It is the refusal to give up even when the grave has been dug. I looked at Leo across the table. He was laughing at something I said, his blue eye sparkling, his scars stretching. "I am Garrett Stone. I am a builder. And this life right here is the best thing I have ever built. This journey taught me that family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty. I lived for decades with people who shared my name but had no concept of my values. I learned that blind trust is not a virtue, it is a vulnerability. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones digging your grave. But most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to fix a mistake. You can always rebuild from the rubble as long as you have the courage to face the truth. Don't let money define your legacy, let your actions speak for you. If this story of justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my shoes, would you have visited Tyler in prison or would you have walked away forever? I want to hear your thoughts.